Namaskar, Adab, Sat Sri Akal, and a very big hello to each one of you. For the last about a week, the whole world is in a state of shock because of the Russian invasion of the neighboring country and a sovereign country, Ukraine. In this regard, if one looks at the various pictures emerging, which is, brutal shelling by the Russian Air Force, the shelling and bombing of the residential areas, women crying and ruining the loss of life or loss of property, I think these pictures would unnerve anybody. But the purpose of this video is to go deeper into where lies the problem and what is the reality about this Ukraine-Russia problem. Now, prima facie, one finds that a sovereign country called Ukraine has been invaded by Russia, which is not only against the prevailing international law norms, but at the same time, it is a violation of the Minsk Protocol of 2014 and 2015. And not only the country has been invaded, but on 21st of February, the Donbas area of Ukraine, which is the eastern part, which comprises the Donetsk and Luhansk provinces of Ukraine, they were recognized by Russia as independent republics, and the very next day, Russia sent its peacekeeping, so-called peacekeeping force to these two provinces, and 24th of February onwards, the full-scale war started. Now, this is the first impression, but if you scratch the surface a little bit, you find the reality lies somewhere else. And actually, the reality is the US, which is on a spree to expand the NATO influence, is on the one side, and then there is Russia, who, having been enfeebled by the disintegration of USSR in 1991, now trying to gain ground and make sure, thanks to the recent axis between Russia, China, and surprisingly Pakistan also, trying to regain some ground and make sure that the inroads that US has been making into Europe and the rest of the world is actually checked. Now, to give you a brief idea about what is the problem between these two power blocs, as you all know, after the Second World War, as US and Russia, they emerged as not only the victor states but mighty states, and US was a bit alarmed that Russia could have a greater influence in the Eastern and Central Europe. And to check that tendency, US came out with an agreement which is known as NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which had actually initially 12 members, and the purpose was to thwart, the Russian influence in Eastern and Central Europe. So it became a power bloc. Now, in 1955, when Germany also joined NATO, Russia got Soviet Union, it was known as Soviet Union then, it got alarmed and it came out with the Warsaw Pact, which is actually the bloc of the socialist countries. So the Warsaw Pact countries and the NATO countries, they became the two power blocs in the world, and ever since 1955 till 1991, we find the era was known as the Cold War between the Warsaw Pact countries and the NATO countries. But in 1991, when because of the internal contradictions, the Soviet Union got disintegrated and all its 15 republics, they frittered away, Russia was at a very low point in terms of its might. And from then on, although Russia was of the view that US could pounce on it and maybe become bigger in terms of the global influence, in 1997 they agreed, the NATO countries and Russia agreed that NATO would not actually go ahead with this expansionist approach. But sadly, in the very next few years, there were great inclusions into the NATO, and we presently find that from being a 12-member strong club to begin with in 1949, presently NATO has 30 countries, and sadly or incidentally, it has 13 members who used to be a part of either the Warsaw Pact or they were aligned to the the Russian bloc. So there lies the problem, and Russia is wary of the fact that very soon, since US has already taken into its fold the three Baltic nations, which is Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, and it also has Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Slovakia, Croatia, all these countries which used to be in Soviet bloc, they are now all NATO members and a threat to Russia. And therefore, when Russia found that Ukraine wants to now become a member of the NATO, it raised a lot of issues about it, and now we see that because of the presence of Russian population in these two provinces which I mentioned in the beginning, Russia made it an issue and said that they want to be recognized as individual republics. The undercurrent remains Russia is not happy if Ukraine even thinks of joining NATO. Now this is where the problem lies. Now if you scratch this surface a little further, you will find that it is a battle between two elephants. But the rest of the whole area, a beautiful area across the world, it is getting trampled and it is getting unnecessarily hassled. I'll give you a few examples, and which will make it very clear that this war actually helps no one and has to be stopped without any further delay. Now you take different countries, what they gain, what they lose. Look at China. Now China, everybody knows, it has in the last few years emerged as a threat to US, and it is nearly at par with US in terms of its might. Now China and Russia, although they seem to be together in most of the international affairs, surprisingly China has not, although it has not called it an invasion, but it has not condemned Russia. The point being, it is aligned with Russia. But the problem with China is that China also has, through its BRI initiative, whereby it is developing infrastructure in various countries. Ukraine happens to be a great ally of China for that project. So it is in a catch-22 situation, if I could say so. The same applies to India. Look at India. India has had Soviet Union and Russia as its most reliable ally all these years, and Russia actually has been the major suppliers of our tanks, and recently we had this S-400 missile system that we purchased from Russia. Now all our supplies come from Russia, but since Russia is aligned with China, now it becomes very typical situation for India which side to take. And in a very peculiar way, India has abstained from the Security Council resolution which condemned Russian invasion, and it found China and UAE also as abstaining. So funny the situation is that India and China have been forced to be bedfellows on something while they have always been seen as adversaries. Now you go to the Europe. The Europe gets more than 40-45% of its gas supplies from Russia and more than 25% of petroleum supply from Russia. Now the problem is, although they are aligned with US, but they know from inside that if they oppose Russia, they would be forced to buy all these commodities from outside at a much higher price. So what is happening is that the whole economy is shattered, and if you give it a very clear thought, you'll find that crude prices, the Brent crude price was 62 plus in January 2021, and by December it had moved to 74, which is again about 15 to 20% or maybe slightly more than that. But between January 2021 and now, it has actually leapfrog to more or nearly 100 US dollar per barrel. So this has been an increase of 70% or more than 70% increase in the fuel prices without even the first gunshot fired. So it actually tells us that when two big countries or two power blocks, when they become over ambitious and fight over something, it actually hurts the whole world and unnecessarily lots of countries. Look at 20,000 plus students of India who are stranded in Ukraine, and they are now trying to come back to India against all odds. And this is not only limited to the Indian students. Worldwide, the supply chains have been affected, the students have been impacted, the airfares have doubled or, much more than that, So the point is that the ambitions of power blocks actually lead to so much of inconvenience and troubled times for the whole humanity. Now, to sum up, I would rather say that as we presently stand, there are indications that the Russian opposition is only to Ukraine joining the NATO club. And there are indications that if the Ukrainian president Zelensky, if he agrees not to join NATO, there is a possibility that Mr. Putin, the Russian president, could order the withdrawal of Russian forces. I think that would be the best result to emerge in this scenario. This would also give Russia some face saving in the sense that they were able to drive home the point. America is already under some criticism that it incited Ukraine, but when the D-Day came, it did not come to help Ukraine militarily because it took the technical stance that it is not a NATO member and I can't send my army. The point is, in this power struggle between two blocks, humanity should not suffer. And let me end with this, that Ukraine actually is a beautiful country. It is known for probably the greatest number of cafes per kilometer. I'm talking about their capital city, Kyiv. It is also known for most beautiful females that they have in their country. And much more than that, many people may not be aware, important technological advancements and innovations like WhatsApp, Snapchat, and if I could say PayPal. Now these things, they all have roots in Ukraine, and I think it is for the whole humanity to sit together and make sure that the struggle between the two power blocks does not ruin such a beautiful country like Ukraine, and the whole humanity actually lives peacefully and harmoniously. I am reminded of Bertrand Russell's quotation many years back, the famous French philosopher and poet and author, when he said, in a war, it is not decided who is right. Actually, what is decided is who is left. And that speaks about the destruction, the losses, and the agony that wars bring. Let's pray that, and I must say, during war times, every moment is precious, or every moment can lead to different results. Who knows, by the time this video gets uploaded, things would have become much more peaceful, and that remains our prayer for the whole world. And I sincerely feel that the whole humanity should come forth, and together we should build a more peaceful and a harmonious world. Please take care of yourself. Namaskar.